Jalen Daniels is back at quarterback, and this might finally be the year that he can break through. People have been saying that pretty much every year throughout his entire career, and I think he's going to be very solid this season, although by no means in contention for a Heisman Trophy or anything like that, like some people might go as far to say. That being said, though, Kansas should have a pretty solid season this year. Lance Leopold has done a really good job rebuilding this program back from the gutters of the Power Five. To start off the season, they also have two pretty easy games. The first one against Fresno State in week 0. Can't put this one quite at 100% because Fresno State has given some Power Five teams trouble in the past. I specifically remember them playing USC very tough. I don't remember if they won that game or not, but Fresno State's a decent team. Kansas is just much better. They should win this game. And then Wagner obviously will be a win to move them to 2-0.
The next game is a renewal of the border war against Missouri, and Mizzou's going to be an interesting team next year. Brady Cook and Luther Burden are both off to the NFL, but they are bringing in Bo Prabula from Penn State, who was the backup for Drew Aller, and instead of leaning more into the wide receiver room, they brought in Ahmad Hardy coming from UL Monroe, and he's expected to be one of the best running backs in the country after having such a huge workload as a Warhawk. And I think Mizzou does have some upside. They also brought in Damon Wilson the second, who originally was at Georgia but recently transferred, one of the most sought after edge rushers in the transfer portal. Mizzou's got a lot of things going for them, especially with some young wide receivers, but really this season hinges on whether or not Prabula can consistently play like he did when he had to step in for Drew Aller when he went down with an injury last season against Wisconsin. I don't know if he has it in him to consistently perform at that high of a level. And we think Jalen Daniels finally does this season for the Jayhawks. Yes, he is losing a lot of his weapons. He's bringing in three new starting wide receivers and a new starting running back. But I think it doesn't really matter if Jalen Daniels can put this team on his back. And I think he is more than capable of doing that. So we think Kansas actually will win the border war here against Mizzou. It will be a dogfight. Mizzou definitely has a lot of upside, but we are going to go with the Jayhawks here. They do have a bye week before they start Big 12 play, and it kicks off with a game against West Virginia. And West Virginia is going to be another interesting team, but not really for the same reasons as Mizzou. They had so many people leave the team in the transfer portal and brought in a ridiculous amount of people to replace them. I believe they actually lost 53 players and brought in 53 players. But it is a homecoming of sorts as West Virginia recently hired Rich Rodriguez to be their head coach once again after being their head coach early on in the 2000s. And he was very successful as their coach, probably their second best coach in program history. But he did start off his career as West Virginia's head coach with a pretty rough season. And I think he's in for a similar scenario this year with just how much they have lost. Granted, they are returning their starting running back in Jaheim White, who definitely raises the floor for West Virginia going into next year. But with some questions at the quarterback position, with Nico Miracle coming in to be the starting quarterback after he's been the backup for a couple of years and is undefeated as a starter, but granted against worse competition. I just think it's not in the cards for West Virginia to have a very successful year compared to Kansas. So we are going to go with the Jayhawks to kick off Big 12 play with a win.
And then it's Cincinnati. Brendan Sorsby returning at the quarterback position, and he had a decent year last year. I think Cincinnati has a chance to be a pretty solid team, maybe push for a bowl game even. It's going to be tough to beat this Kansas team. I think Kansas is very solid overall. Connor has hit quite a few of the points there. Just Jalen Daniels is a huge playmaker. And while he's going to be really good, the Big 12 is full of upsets. In Cincinnati, I do believe will pull off one of those upsets here, dropping Kansas to 4-1 before a road trip to UCF. And Central Florida not going to be very good this season, losing a lot of production from last year. I think they're going to struggle quite a bit in Big 12 play, and this is a really good game for Kansas to try and get a bounce back win in. And I do think that they're going to be able to do that before this schedule gets a lot tougher.
Starts with a road trip to face Texas Tech. The Red Raiders are bringing in the number two overall transfer portal class. They have brand new facilities for their players, and everything is just pointing in the right direction after a pretty solid year last year. They had some really good competitive moments, but did fall short against some of the better teams. But I think this year is going to be the year for the Red Raiders. Like I said, so much going in the right direction. They do have Baron Morton returning as their starting quarterback after a phenomenal season throwing for over 3,000 yards with 27 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. They will have to replace their starting running back from last year, who was Taj Brooks, as he is off to the NFL. But I think Texas Tech is going to be very solid defensively as long as they take the right steps forward. This is going to be a very, very good team. And Kansas does have some questions on the defense just because they've lost so many of their personnel from last year. Granted, it was replaced with some solid talent in the transfer portal, but compared to what Texas Tech is bringing in, I don't know if it will be enough, even if Jalen Daniels is playing at his best. Texas Tech will get the win, dropping Kansas to 5-2. And then they have a bye week to prepare for the Sunflower Showdown against Kansas State. And the Wildcats are going to be one of the best teams in the Big 12 going into next season. Returning Avery Johnson as their starting quarterback after a great season, returning a lot of his weapons in the wide receiver room as well. Everything is going in the right direction for this Kansas State team. And Kansas State has gone on quite a long win streak in the Sunflower Showdown. They have not lost this game since 2008, which was in Lawrence, Kansas. And really, we'd be pretty foolish to pick Kansas to upset this good of a Kansas State team. But that's exactly what we're going to do. Jalen Daniels will get a bounce back win with a bye week in between after that Texas Tech loss. And I think at this point in the season, we might see the younger guys or the guys that are coming into the program step it up and really power this Kansas team to a win over a very good Kansas State team. And this makes them bowl eligible, getting their sixth win before facing a pretty weak Oklahoma State team at home as well. They should get a win over the Cowboys. They just have not been the same team that they once were. Ollie Gordon's off to the NFL after a pretty lackluster second year, and there's really just nothing going the right way for the Cowboys here. The Jayhawks will ride the high of winning the Sunflower Showdown to move to 7-2.
Yeah, I mean, this Kansas team, I think, has the potential to beat some really solid teams, like Connor just said, with Kansas State. And as I mentioned earlier, the Big 12 is all about upsets, one of the most chaotic conferences in all of college football. So this is something that we think very likely can happen this year. Next is a matchup with Noah Fafita and Arizona. The Wildcats going to have a tough task to replace Tadaro McMillan at the wide receiver position, Fafita's favorite target from last year. It's not going to be easy whatsoever. They're going to need some guys to step up in that wide receiver room in order to have a better season than that very disappointing one we saw last year, where Arizona was only 5-7. And I think that they're going to be a solid team this year. It's definitely going to be tough, but I think they're going to be able to beat Kansas, kind of slow down the Jayhawks momentum a little bit. And like we've been saying all along, I just mentioned it. The Big 12 is full of upsets. Kansas and Arizona, while I think Kansas is a little bit more talented all around, I think Arizona has a really good shot to win this game at home. Then it's a road trip to Iowa State, and Ames is going to be rocking this year as they have some really good home matchups, such as this one. Rocco Becht returning at the quarterback position, and he's going to have a really good year, I think. Iowa State, just all around, seems like they're going to be a really solid team once again, just one game shy of making the college football playoffs last year in that blowout loss in the Big 12 championship to Arizona State. And I think Iowa State's going to have another really good season. making the Big 12 championship's not going to be easy because the conference is so chaotic, but they're one of our favorites to be able to do that. I think the Cyclones are a better team than Kansas. It's not to say Kansas is bad by any means, but they will lose this game and drop to 7-4.
And the culmination of the season is a home game against Utah, and the Utes are looking like a team that might actually be a competitive one in the Big 12. We say that every year. Utah ends up in the top 25, whether it's as a top 15 team, a top 10 team, or just sneaking in as a very low top 25 team. But this year feels a little different. Cam Rising is finally gone after leaving the program after what feels like an eternity after dealing with so many injuries. And they brought in Devin Dampier to be the starting quarterback from New Mexico, who has a lot of upside, has dual threat capabilities, which is a lot different than what we've seen from past Utah quarterbacks. They're also bringing in Wayshawn Parker from Washington State as their starting running back after a phenomenal freshman season. Utah is looking like a solid team once again, and it's going to be a tough game against Kansas, especially on the road for the Utes. This one really could go back and forth. As you see, it's a 50% chance. Both these head coaches have done wonders for their program, but I think at the end of the day, there's just slightly more experienced weapons or experienced players on Utah's team than there is on Kansas. So unfortunately, Kansas is going to end their season on a three-game losing streak, but they did get to bowl eligibility earlier on, so they will be playing in some bowl game and have a good chance to get a win in that bowl game, regardless of who they are playing.
Our way too early projection was 7.95 wins. We had Kansas going 7-5 originally, kept that same prediction. The projection dropped a little bit to 7.5 wins, 5.15 and 3.85 in Big 12 play. I think the floor for the Jayhawks is going to be missing a bowl game down at 5-7. There's definitely some tough games on here, some games where there's upset potential. I could see the Jayhawks missing a bowl game, but they have equally as good of a chance, I think, to go 9-3. A lot of these games really could go either way, including some of the ones that we had them losing. So I think that there's a lot of potential for this Kansas team, but Jalen Daniels is going to have to play out of his mind in order for them to hit this ceiling of 9-3. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.